Kitty is a kind but awkward fisherman's daughter living in the quiet village of Saltmir when she discovers a handsome stranger washed ashore with no memory of who he is. Fearing the villagers will reject him, she gives him the name Micah and helps him build a new life in the village. As months pass, Kitty falls deeply in love with him while secretly befriending a mysterious giant white wolf that appears on the beach each night, bringing her gifts and watching over her. Unknown to her at first, Micah and the wolf are the same person, a cursed wolf shifter who forgets his human life when he transforms and forgets his wolf life when he returns to human form. When livestock and villagers begin turning up dead, the village blames the wolf, while Eric, a jealous and cruel man obsessed with Kitty, leads the hunt. After the wolf saves Kitty from Eric and his friends during an assault, suspicion grows stronger. Kitty eventually discovers Micah's secret and risks everything to prove his innocence, uncovering that Eric himself has been committing the murders and framing the wolf to eliminate rivals and gain power. When Eric kidnaps Kitty and attempts to kill her, the wolf breaks free despite being drugged and restrained, rescues her, and kills Eric in self-defense. In front of the entire village, Micah transforms back into his human form, revealing the truth. He then regains his lost memories and is revealed to be the missing Alpha King, cursed by a rejected queen to forget both his identity and his wolf nature until someone could genuinely love both halves of him without knowing they were the same. Kitty's unwavering love breaks the curse. His royal family finally finds him, and the villagers learn the truth about Eric's crimes. In the end, Micah publicly declares Kitty his destined mate and future queen, proving that the woman who loved both the man and the wolf was the one person capable of saving him. Chapter 1. 4 months earlier. To understand why the wolf appeared in Saltmir's woods and why it came to Kitty's help, you must first understand how she met Micah. And that story begins on a quiet beach at dawn. The sky was the color of old pewter and the sea was flat and gray beneath it. Kitty was already on the beach, boots slung over one shoulder, bare feet sinking into wet sand. She came here most mornings before the village woke. It was the only time of day that belonged entirely to her. No voices from the docks, no carts rattling over cobblestones, just the birds, then the water, and the slow lightening of the sky. But this morning there was a shape on the sand that didn't belong there. For a moment she thought it was a seal, but it was man. Half in and half out of the surf, unmoving, Kitty dropped her boots and ran. "Sir!" She fell on her knees beside him. He was the kind of beautiful that had no business existing in a place like Saltmir, in a world of fish guts and gray water. Water lapped at his legs, at his hips, but his upper body was clear of it, and his shirt, fine fabric, finer than anything she'd ever seen, was torn open. Kitty's face went hot. She could see everything, the broad expanse of his chest, the hard planes of muscle. She'd seen men without shirts before, but this was different. This made something low in her stomach twist and tighten in a way she'd never felt before. She found herself tracing the lines of his body with her eyes. Focus, she told herself, but her hands were shaking as she leaned over him and pressed her ear to his chest. His skin was cold, but she could feel the slow, steady thump of his heartbeat against her cheek. He was alive. She looked up at the path above the beach, her heart hammering. Luckily, there was old Brennan shuffling along toward the docks. A Brennan, she shouted, "Help, get help." He squinted down at her confused, then finally shuffled back toward the village when he realized. Kitty turned back to the stranger. She pulled him further up the sand away from the waves that were still trying to claim him and brushed the wet hair from his face. She'd never wanted to touch someone before. Not like this. Not with this aching, desperate curiosity about what his skin would feel like under her fingers. His eyes opened pale blue, and looking at her, Kitty forgot how to breathe. Where the man began. His voice was rough, broken, and even that made something flutter in her chest. "You're on a beach," she blurted. "I mean Saltmir," she continued desperately. "You washed up on the beach, which you can. Obviously you can see that." "Stop talking," she thought. "Stop talking right now." He tried to sit up and winced. "What's your name?" she asked, trying to sound normal. He opened his mouth closed. It shook his head slowly. "I don't know," he said, and the lost look in his eyes was worse than anything. I don't remember." He looked around as if the beach might give him answers. "Do you remember anything?" Kitty pressed. "A ship, a storm?" "No," his voice broke on the word. "Nothing." He looked down at his hands like they belonged to someone else, like he was seeing them for the first time. The fear in his face made her chest ache. Then Kitty heard voices. Brennan was coming back, and he'd brought others. She could see them on the path above her father's tall frame, Garrick's stooped shoulders, others gathering. She had seconds, maybe less. Kitty looked at the stranger, at his beautiful, lost face. She knew what would happen if he had no name, if he had no story. Salt didn't trust what it couldn't explain. They'd turn him away, throw him back in the sea, and she would never see him again. The thought was unbearable. She needed to think of something. Micah, she decided. He blinked at her. "Excuse me?" he asked, confused. "Your name is Micah," she said, leaning closer. "You fell from a ship, you hit your head, but your name is Micah. Do you understand?" He stared at her. She stared back, but he started. "Please," she whispered, "just trust me. Your name is Micah." Somehow it felt right. Somehow it almost didn't feel like a lie. Micah the man repeated slowly. "Yes," she breathed. The voices were closer now. She could hear her father calling her name. Micah looked at her with those impossible eyes. "Thank you," he said quietly. He didn't feel what she felt. She could see that. There was gratitude in his face, confusion, fear, but not the wild, desperate thing that was clawing at her ribs, not the want. He didn't know her. But when he looked at her like that, she knew it didn't matter. She was already lost. Chapter 2. The market square smelled like salt and fish and the smoke from the blacksmith's forge. Kitty shifted her basket from one hip to the other and tried to focus on the task at hand, delivering the morning's catch to old Garrick's stall. She was not succeeding. The forge was directly across the square, and Micah was at the anvil, stripped down to his shirt sleeves. Despite the autumn chill, the hammer rang against hot metal in a steady rhythm that seemed to echo in her chest. He'd been working there for a month now, and apparently his hands remembered smithing, even if his mind remembered nothing else. And the problem was that half the women in Saltmir had apparently discovered urgent business near the forge. Lena was there leaning against the fence post. Bess appeared from the direction of the well, which was nowhere near the forge. They both watched Micah work with the kind of intense focus usually reserved for counting coins. Kitty knew this because she'd been not watching from behind the fish stall for at least 10 minutes. Micah looked up, pushing dark hair off his forehead with the back of his hand. He said something Kitty couldn't hear over the distance and the noise of the square. Both women laughed. Kitty's knuckles went white on the basket handle. "You're going to break that," her father said, appearing beside her. Kitty loosened her grip. "No, I'm not." Her father followed her gaze across the square. "That's quite a crowd he's drawing." "Really, I hadn't noticed," Kitty said. "I mean, who?" Her father snorted. "You know, he said the blacksmith mentioned yesterday he's been wanting to try that northern fish stew, the one your mother used to make. I told him you knew the recipe." Kitty's head snapped toward him. "You did what I was being helpful." Her father's expression was pure innocence. "I also mentioned you'd be happy to bring him the fish for it since you're such a generous soul." "Papa?" she whined. In fact, her father continued, clearly enjoying himself. "You should probably bring it over now before someone else offers." Kitty looked back at the forge. Lena was still there, touching Micah's arm, saying something that made him smile. Kitty found herself crossing the square. Lena and Beth saw her coming. Kitty, the former, said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "What a surprise. I'm just delivering fish," Kitty said. "Of course you are," Beth snorted. Micah looked up from the horseshoe. He was shaping his shirt, damp with sweat, and clinging to his shoulders in a way that made Kitty's mouth go dry. "Kitty," he said, just her name, and every coherent thought in her head scattered like birds startled from the rocks. "Yes," she managed. There was a beat of silence. "Did you need something?" Micah asked. "Yes," she thought, "you. I need you to notice me. I need you to look at me the way you look at the metal when you're shaping it, like I'm something worth paying attention to." What came out was fish. Micah blinked. "Fish," he repeated. "For the stew," Kitty continued, her face heating. "My father said you wanted." She thrust the basket at him. Micah took it, his fingers brushing hers for just a second. "That's really kind of you," he said. Kitty nodded. Words had apparently left her entirely. "I'd love to hear the recipe," Micah continued. "For your family stew, your father said your mother taught you what went into it." He was looking right at her, those pale blue eyes focused entirely on her face. "Seaweed," Kitty blurted. Micah's eyebrows rose. "No, I mean." Kitty wanted to die. Not seaweed. Fish. Obviously fish and other things. "Other things," Micah repeated. Lena made a sound that might have been a cough, but was definitely a laugh. "I should go," Kitty said abruptly. She turned and walked away at a pace that was definitely too fast, her face so hot she thought she might actually combust. Behind her, she heard Bess whisper something to Lena. It wasn't kind. Kitty made it to the corner of the smokehouse before she stopped and pressed her forehead against the rough stone wall. "Seaweed," she muttered to herself. "I said seaweed. It didn't get better." At the tavern that evening, Micah was there. He lived in the room above it now, had settled into village life with an ease that suggested some part of him remembered how to be among people even if he couldn't remember who he'd been. He sat with some of the fishermen laughing at something Garrick said. Meanwhile, Kitty sat with her father in the corner, trying not to stare and failing miserably. When Micah got up to get another drink, and as he passed their table, he paused. "Kitty, is something the matter?" he asked kindly. "You keep looking over." Her father made a choking sound into his ale. "No," Kitty said. "I wasn't. I was just... There was a spider on the wall behind you." Micah turned to look at the wall. "I don't see a spider." He said it left. Kitty said it was shy. A shy spider. Micah nodded and smiled at her that same kind, confused smile and went to the bar. Her father set down his cup and looked at her with an expression of profound sympathy. "A shy spider?" he asked. "Don't," Kitty said. That night, sleep wouldn't come. It hadn't come easily in weeks. Not since the morning on the beach, not since pale blue eyes and the feeling of a heartbeat under her palm. But tonight was worse. Kitty rolled onto her side, pulled the blanket over her head, and tried to force her mind to go blank. Instead, she saw him. The way he'd looked at the forge, pushing his hair back with the back of his hand. The way he'd smiled at her when he'd said her name. She was in love with a man who smiled at her the same way he smiled at everyone and who had no idea that she spent every waking moment thinking about him. Kitty pressed her palms to her eyes and finally she gave up. She slipped out of the cottage and walked to the beach. The moon was full and the tide was low and the sand was cool under her bare feet. Here she could breathe well until a low rustling came from the tree. That is, Kitty turned. A wolf stood at the border of the trees. Chapter 3. The wolf didn't move, didn't growl, didn't crouch. It simply stood at the edge of the trees watching. It was enormous, bigger than any wolf should be. Its fur was white, almost luminous in the moonlight. Fear hit first, sharp and primal. Her hand flew to the gutting knife at her belt. The silence stretched, nothing but the crash of waves and the whisper of wind. The wolf watched. Its ears were forward, alert, but not aggressive. Its tail hung low and still. Everything about its posture said, "I'm not a threat," Hello Kitty whispered. The wolf's ears tilted forward, a small movement, a sign it had heard her, but it didn't come closer, and it didn't leave. They stayed like that for a long time, girl and wolf watching each other. Finally, when the moon had moved across the sky, "I should go," Kitty said quietly. "My father will worry." The wolf's golden eyes held hers for a long moment before it turned and melted back into the trees without a sound. The next night, she went back. She told herself it was stupid that the wolf wouldn't be there, that even if it was, she was insane for seeking it out. She went anyway, and he was waiting. This time she sat on the sand closer to the tree. "I don't know if you can understand me," Kitty said quietly. The wolf's ears moved with her voice tracking every word. "There's this man," she found herself saying, drawing patterns in the sand. "He's beautiful and kind, and I can't form a complete sentence around him." The wolf's tail swept across the sand once. "Everyone knows how I feel about him. Everyone except him, and I don't know which is worse, that he doesn't notice or that if he did, he probably wouldn't. I mean, why would he? I'm just Kitty. Weird Kitty who talks to birds and collects rocks." She looked up at the wolf. "You probably think I'm pathetic." The wolf made a sound low and soft. Not a growl, something that felt almost like disagreement. When she finally stood to leave, the wolf made that sound again. Different, this time quieter, almost like a question. "I'll come tomorrow," Kitty promised. The third night, the wolf was closer, halfway between the woods and the water. It walked toward her, slow, measured steps across the sand. She stayed perfectly still as it approached, her heart racing, but she didn't run. The fourth night, Kitty knelt in the sand. The wolf was already there, waiting. It approached as soon as it saw her. No hesitation now. Her hand trembled as she reached out. She pressed her palm to the fur at its neck. It was warm and coarse and unbelievably soft underneath. "You're so warm," she whispered. The wolf made a sound low and rumbling that she felt more than heard. Its nose moved along her wrist, her forearm breathing her in. When she finally pulled back, the wolf stood and disappeared into the trees. She thought that was the end of it, but it came back. In its mouth was something small, a shell pink and white and smooth as glass, placed carefully at her feet like an offering. "You brought this for me?" Kitty asked, awed. The wolf's tail moved. Over the following nights, it became their ritual. She brought scraps of food. The wolf ate from her hand with a gentleness that should have been impossible for something with jaws that could snap bone. And each night, it brought her something, a piece of sea lass green and frosted by the waves. She kept them in a pouch under her pillow. During the day, she'd take them out sometimes and hold them, running her fingers over each one, remembering. And she told no one. Not her father, who would worry. Not anyone in the village who would think she'd lost her mind. This was hers. The wolf was hers. Chapter 4, the sheep lay in the middle of the square with its throat torn open. The smell hit Kitty, first blood and fear. The carcass had been there since dawn, someone said, found at the edge of the village, dragged into the square so everyone could see. The villagers had formed a loose circle around it, keeping their distance. Old Garrick stood closest, his weathered face grim. That's the third this week, someone muttered behind Kitty. Fourth, if you count the one at Brennan's farm. Kitty pushed forward through the crowd. They've been going on for weeks now, Garrick was saying to the elders. Started small, a chicken here and there, then the sheep. It can't be a fox. It's the wolf, Eric said, his voice carried loud and certain. The one Harold spotted 2 weeks ago, a white wolf, big as a horse, he said. The crowd murmured, nervous energy rippling through them. They knew, Kitty realized. They knew about the wolf, and since Harold saw it, Garrick continued. The killings have gotten worse. 3 sheep in the last week, another elder added. And now this dragged right to the edge of the village. We don't know that it's the wolf, Marin said quietly. Harold saw a wolf, yes, but he didn't see it attack anything. What else could it be, Eric demanded. Livestock starts dying the same time a monster wolf appears. That's not a coincidence. It doesn't matter what it is. One of the fishermen said, it's killing our livestock. Garrick agreed. We need to do something. We hunt it, Eric said tonight. Kitty's hands tightened on her basket. That wolf didn't do this. We'll need torches, Eric was saying. We spread out through the woods, drive it toward the beach corner and kill it. The elders were nodding. The crowd was nodding. Wait, Kitty said. Heads turned. Eric's eyes found hers across the circle. You haven't actually seen the wolf attack anything. You're just guessing. The killings could be something else, she said. Something else, Eric's voice was mocking. Like what, Kitty? Shy spider laughter rippled through the crowd. I'm just saying we don't know for certain. No one cares what you think, Eric said flatly. We're hunting tonight, and if you're so worried about your wolf, maybe you should stay home and not get in the way. He turned his back on her, dismissing her. The crowd moved on, already discussing routes and meeting times. Kitty stood there for a moment longer, humiliation burning in her cheeks before she turned and walked away. She found herself near the forge without meaning to. Micah was sitting on the bench outside, head in his hands. His skin looked gray. Micah. Kitty approached cautiously. He looked up. It took him a moment to focus on her like he was coming back from somewhere far away. Kitty, hi. She set her basket down. Up close, he looked even worse. His hands were scratched and raw, the kind of marks you got from dragging yourself through brambles. Are you all right, fine, he said automatically. Why? Kitty gestured at his hands. What happened? Micah looked down at them like he was seeing them for the first time. He turned them over slowly, studying the scratches. I don't know. You don't know. I mean, they weren't like this yesterday. I think he trailed off, something uncomfortable flickering across his face. I woke up on the floor of the forge this morning, Micah said abruptly. I don't remember going there. Don't remember falling asleep. Kitty's chest tightened. Sometimes when we're anxious or too tired, we do things we don't remember, she said gently. Are you having trouble sleeping? Micah Garrick's voice boomed across the square. I need you at the forge. We're making spearheads for tonight. Micah stood immediately, almost too quickly, like he was relieved to have an excuse to end the conversation. Sorry, I should, of course, she said. But maybe you should see Marin. She might have something to help you. Micah nodded, already walking away, his shoulders slumped. Kitty watched him go, her worry deepening. He was clearly unwell, exhausted, lost. And tonight the village would go hunting for the wolf. That afternoon she went to see Marin. The village elder lived in a cottage at the far end of Saltmir, small and cluttered, every surface covered with jars and bundles of dried herbs. Kitty Marin said, opening the door before Kitty could knock. Come in. She gestured to a chair and began gathering jars from her shelves without being asked. You want something for the blacksmith? Maureen said. Not a question. How did you have that look like you're trying to fix something, and you've had your eye on that boy since he washed up on the beach. Kitty's face heated. I'm not. It's not. Don't lie to an old woman. Marin set 3 jars on the table. He's having trouble sleeping. Something like that. Marin was quiet for a moment, thoughtful. Then she resumed her work, mixing dried leaves into a small cloth pouch. Valerian root chamomile lavender. Tell him to steep it in hot water before bed. It should help with the sleep at least. She tied the pouch closed. Thank you, Kitty said, taking it. How much do I? Nothing. Marin waved her hand. Consider it a kindness. Kitty should have left then. But the worry sat heavy in her chest and Marin's cottage felt safe. Marin hadn't accused the wolf of anything earlier. And because the old woman's eyes were kind, because Kitty was so tired of carrying this secret alone, she told her everything about the wolf the nights on the beach. Marion listened without interrupting. When Kitty finally ran out of words, the old woman was quiet for a long moment. "It might be a shifter," Marin said finally. Kitty blinked. "A what? A shifter?" Marin leaned back in her chair. "Creatures that wear two shapes, human and animal." Kitty's mind went blank, then started racing. A shifter, a creature that could be both human and animal. Could her wolf be a man? The thought was insane. But once it lodged in her mind, she couldn't shake it. "But if he can change," Kitty said slowly. "If it's a person, why wouldn't it shift back, show itself?" Marin shrugged. "Perhaps it can't. Perhaps he doesn't remember how." Chapter 5, Present Day. Right after the wolf appeared to defend Kitty from Eric, the wolf lunged. Everything happened at once. Eric shoved Kitty forward, using her as a shield, and she hit the ground hard. Gravel bit into her palms. The wolf sailed over her white fur and gleaming teeth and a snarl that sounded like murder-given voice. It hit Eric square in the chest. They went down together in a tangle of limbs and fur and screaming. Eric's knife clattered across the stones. Harlan was shouting something, swinging his torch like a club. The wolf twisted mid-air, impossibly fast, impossibly graceful, and Harlan's torch hit nothing but empty space. Wynn ran. Kitty scrambled backward on her hands and knees, her heart hammering so hard she couldn't breathe. She couldn't see, couldn't process what she was seeing. The wolf was everywhere, at once a blur of white and gold eyes and teeth that flashed in the moonlight. Harlan swung again. The wolf caught his arm in its jaws, not biting down, just holding, and Harlan screamed high and terrified. The wolf released him, and he stumbled backward, tripped and ran after Wynn. Eric was still on the ground. Scrambling backward on his elbows, his face white with terror. The wolf stalked toward him, slow, deliberate, every step measured and precise. "Stay back." Eric gasped. "Stay back, you!" The wolf planted one massive paw on Eric's chest, pinning him. Eric went silent. The wolf lowered its head until its muzzle was inches from Eric's face. Its lips pulled back, those enormous fangs gleamed. Eric was crying, actual tears running down his face, his whole body shaking. The wolf didn't bite, it just held him there, one paw on his chest, and growled low and long and deliberate. A promise. Then it lifted its paw. Eric scrambled away so fast he left his knife behind. She heard him crashing through the undergrowth, still sobbing, running for his life. The wolf turned. Its golden eyes found Kitty. There was blood on its muzzle. Not much, just a smear across white fur, but enough. Its sides were heaving, breath coming in harsh pants. Its eyes were wild, not quite focused, like it was somewhere between thought and instinct. For one heartbeat, she saw what the village saw. A monster, a predator, enormous and bloodied, and standing in the dark with violence still crackling through every muscle. And then it wed a soft, high sound, almost a question, almost, "Are you hurt?" The wildness faded from its eyes. What was left was familiar, was hers. Kitty got to her feet. She wrapped her arms around its neck and felt it shaking. The great predator that had just scattered 3 grown men was trembling like a leaf. "I know," she whispered into its fur. "You were protecting me." The wolf pressed closer, its massive head tucked under her chin. And then she heard it, voices, torchlight flickering between the trees. The hunt drawn by the screaming, by the noise they were coming. If they found the wolf here with blood on its mouth and Eric's story already spreading, it was dead. Kitty grabbed the thick fur at the wolf's shoulders and pulled. "Down," she said, urgently. "Get down." The wolf dropped to its belly. She swung one leg over its back. Absurd, impossible. She'd never even ridden a horse, and locked her knees against its sides. Her fingers twisted in the thick fur at its neck. "Go," she said. "Run." The wolf surged to its feet and disappeared into the woods. Chapter 6. The next morning, Kitty had not slept. She'd sat in the dark until dawn broke gray and cheerless over the water, then forced herself to rise and dress and walk to the square like it was any other morning. It was already crowded when she arrived, too crowded for this early. Something was wrong. Eric stood at the center, his face bruised along one side. Harlan stood behind him, his forearm wrapped in bandages. They were surrounded by villagers, the elders, the fishermen women who should have been at the market stalls. Everyone. Kitty's steps slowed, Eric's eyes locking onto hers across the square. "There she is," he said, loud enough to carry. "Ask her yourself." Heads turned. Kitty felt the weight of every gaze. "Eric was just telling us what happened last night," Garrick said. Kitty's mouth went dry. "What did he say?" That you called the wolf, Lena's mother said sharp and accusing, that you've been taming it. That's not Kitty started. But Eric was already talking over her. We were on patrol, Heron, Wynn, and I. We saw Kitty walking toward the woods alone, thought she might be in danger with that beast loose, so we called out to her, tried to warn her. His face was earnest, concerned, like he cared. And then the wolf came, but not from the woods, from behind her. It didn't attack until we got close to her. The murmuring started low and uneasy. That's not what happened, Kitty said, but her voice came out thin and shaking. Oh, she's been feeding it, Eric interrupted. Haven't you, Kitty? The murmuring grew louder. Kitty's heart was racing. That thing is her creature, Eric said, and when we tried to protect this village from it, it attacked us. Harlan's arm is torn open. I have 3 broken ribs, no, Kitty said desperately. It's not like that. Then what is it like, Garrick asked. Kitty's throat closed. She couldn't lie. Not to these people she'd known her whole life. I can explain what? That you've been sneaking out at night to meet with the thing that's been killing our livestock. It didn't attack them, Kitty insisted. It was protecting me, from what someone shouted, from men trying to keep you safe. They weren't trying to keep me safe. Eric had his hands on me. My hands on you, Eric laughed harshly. She's been feeding that thing for months while it's been slaughtering our sheep. That's an interesting story, Eric. The voice was calm, measured. It cut through the chaos like a knife through water. Everyone turned. Micah stepped into the circle. Can I ask a few questions, Micah said. Eric's smile faltered. What you said you were on patrol. You, Harlan, and Wynn, but you'd been drinking. We'd had a few, Eric said defensively. What of it? Micah turned to address the crowd. I passed the tavern just after sundown last night. Eric and his friends were already 4 rounds deep at the bar. The murmuring shifted. So, what? Eric snapped. After you got drunk, Micah's eyebrows rose. That seems dangerous. Wouldn't you want to be clear-headed for a patrol? Eric's jaw clenched. We were fine. You also said Kitty was hostile when you tried to warn her, Micah continued. But a woman alone at night would be just as frightened of 3 rowdy drunk men as she would be of a wild animal, maybe more so. Eric's composure was cracking. You weren't there. You don't know what happened. You're right, Micah agreed. I wasn't there. Neither was anyone else. That's my point. All we have is your word, and you were drunk. He paused. And you've never liked Kitty much, have you, since she rejected your marriage proposal? Eric's face went red. That has nothing to do with, doesn't it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like 3 drunk men cornered a woman alone at night. The silence was absolute. Eric stared at Micah with raw fury blazing in his eyes. Then he turned and walked away. The tension broke. People began to disperse, murmuring to each other, no longer certain, no longer angry, just confused. The square emptied slowly. Micah stood across from her, and when their eyes met, he gave her a small nod. Kitty stood alone in the square and tried to remember how to breathe. Later, dusk came gray and cold. Kitty stepped outside to fetch water from the well. She was halfway there when she saw him, Micah moving toward the tree-ine. But something was wrong. His arms hung at his sides, loose and lifeless. His eyes were glassy, unfocused. Kitty dropped the bucket and ran. Micah, she called. He didn't react. She caught up to him, grabbed his arm. Micah, wait. Micah. She touched his face. His skin was cold. Micah, can you hear me? Nothing. Not even a flicker of recognition. His arm pulled free from her grip, and he kept walking toward the woods. Micah, stop, Kitty said desperately. She looked around frantically, but the square was empty, everyone inside for supper. She grabbed his arm again, used all her weight to try to stop him. He pulled away stronger this time, still gentle but unstoppable. And then he was at the tree and stepping into the shadows. Kitty followed him into the woods. The woods grew darker, thicker. Ahead, Micah's silhouette was just visible. And then he stopped. Kitty froze, pressing herself against a tree trunk. She edged closer. The clearing opened before her, a perfect circle carpeted in moss. Micah stood at the center. He looked like he was waiting for something. A tremor ran through his hands. Then it moved up his arms into his shoulders, and suddenly his whole body convulsed. He dropped to his knees with a sound that was half gasp, half sob. Kitty's hand flew to her mouth. His back arched, and he cried out, a sound that was neither human nor animal, raw and torn. His bones shifted. She could hear it, a wet, grinding sound. His spine curved backward. His shoulders collapsed forward. His fingers thickened, lengthened. Kitty bit down on her hand to keep from screaming. Fur pushed through his skin like frost spreading across glass white and dense, covering his body in waves. His clothes tore away as his body expanded, changed. His face changed last. The jaw extended with a crack. His nose and mouth pushed forward, reshaping. Less than a minute. The whole thing took less than a minute. When it was over, the wolf stood where Micah had knelt. Her wolf. The torn remnants of Micah's clothes lay scattered around it. Kitty was shaking so badly she had to brace herself against the tree. The wolf lifted its head, its nostrils flared, testing the air. It turned in a slow circle, searching, and then it found her. It crossed the clearing in 3 long strides and pushed through the undergrowth until it was right in front of her. Its nose pressed into her palm. It wheezed a soft, high sound and pressed its massive forehead against her chest. Relieved, the wolf was relieved to find her. Kitty's legs gave out. She sank to her knees and wrapped her arms around the wolf's neck, burying her face in thick white fur. "I know," she whispered. "I know who you are. It's all right." The wolf made that rumbling sound that meant contentment. It curled around her, its body warm and solid. Of course it was him, the timing, the exhaustion, the scratches on his hands, the lost nights. The way the wolf looked at her with those gold eyes, she should have seen it sooner. "We need to go," she said quietly. "The hunters are still out there. If they find you," she stood. The wolf stood with her pressed against her side. They moved through the woods together. Every snapping branch sounded like a hunter. Every distant voice made her freeze. Her cottage appeared through the trees, dark, her father still out searching with the other men. She led it through the garden to the back door, up the narrow stairs into her small bedroom. The wolf circled twice, testing the floor with its paws, and then lay down beside her bed with a heavy sigh. Kitty knelt beside it. "You don't know, do you?" she whispered. "You don't know you're him. You don't remember being Micah at all." The wolf's eyes were half closed, already drifting toward sleep. It set its chin on her knee. She thought about what Maureen had said. Perhaps it doesn't know what it is. "I'm the only one who knows," she said quietly. "I'm the only one who knows you're the same." The wolf made a soft sound, its eyes closed fully. Kitty didn't sleep. She couldn't. The night stretched long and quiet. Outside, she heard distant voices. The search party still looking. Dawn came gray and hesitant through the shutters. Kitty's eyes burned with exhaustion. She stood slowly stretching and turned to check on the wolf. It was gone. Micah lay on the floor where the wolf had been. He was curled on his side, asleep, one arm tucked under his head. His dark hair fell across his forehead, and he was completely, utterly bare. Chapter 7. Kitty held her breath as Micah's eyes opened slowly. First he looked at her with mild curiosity, sleepy recognition, and then he smiled, warm and unguarded. The way someone smiles at a familiar face when they're still half in dreams. It went straight to her heart like an arrow. That smile. Then his brow furrowed. He looked around the small room, the rough wooden beams, the narrow bed, the shuttered window. His eyes went back to her, and the confusion deepened. "Kitty," he said, his voice rough with sleep and rising panic. "What did I—" "It's all right," Kitty said quickly. "You're in my room. You're safe." "Everything is your room," Micah interrupted. He looked around again as if confirming it. "Nobody saw you," Kitty said, trying to sound reassuring. "Nobody knows you're here." That seemed to make it worse. Micah's hands fisted in the blanket. Did I follow you here?" His voice dropped to a whisper. "Did I hurt you?" "No," Kitty said immediately. "Well, yes. I mean," she saw his face crumble. "I mean, you did follow me here," she said quickly, desperately. "But you didn't hurt me, Micah." She tried to smile encouragingly, but face went from pale to gray. "What did I do?" he asked, barely audible. And then Kitty realized why he looked so horrified. "Nothing happened," she blurted out. "Micah, nothing. We didn't. You just slept, that's all." He didn't look convinced. "I should go," he said, voice tight with shame. "Wait," Kitty said firmly. "Look, Micah, there's something you need to know." His whole body was tense, coiled, ready to run. Kitty moved closer, reached out slowly, and touched his arm. He froze at the contact. "Stay," Kitty said softly. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen before you speak." "Can you do that?" He stared at her for a long moment, then he nodded, not trusting his voice. Kitty took a breath. "Last night, I followed you into the woods," she said. "You were sleepwalking. I think you went to a clearing." She paused. This was it, the moment where she told him. "And then you shifted," she revealed. Micah frowned. "Sorry, What? You shifted?" Kitty repeated. Micah shook his head slowly. He genuinely had no idea what she was talking about. "Marin, the village elder, she told me about shifters," Kitty explained. "People who can transform, who have the power to take on a different form." "A different form," Micah repeated, incredulous. "An animal form," Kitty said. And then because there was no other way to go about it, because it had to be said, "You're the wolf. The white wolf. The white wolf." Micah's eyes widened. The wolf everyone is looking for. I know it sounds insane, Kitty said quickly, but I promise you, Micah, I saw it with my own eyes. Micah stared at her. He pressed his hands to his face. When he spoke again, his voice was muffled, broken. "I thought I was going insane." "You're not," Kitty said, her throat tightening. I thought his voice broke. The mornings waking up in the woods, in ditches once in the middle of the road with no idea how I got there. Without thinking, Kitty reached out and took his hand. His fingers were cold. "You're just changing at night," she said firmly. "But you're still you. How do you know?" he asked. "Because I've been with the wolf," she said, "for months on the beach. It never hurt me." She squeezed his hand. "Whatever you become at night, it's not mindless, it's not violent, it's still you, Micah." He stared at her for a long moment, then he laughed. "You sat on a beach with a wolf for months," he asked. Kitty's face heated. "I didn't know it was you. You sat on a beach with a wolf," he repeated slowly. "And you weren't afraid," she shrugged. "It brought me shells." He stared at her like she was the magic, not him. "You're insane," he said softly, but he was almost smiling. Maybe Kitty admitted, "But so are you. So we match." The space between them felt smaller, suddenly warmer. She could see the exact moment he registered how close they were sitting, his eyes widening slightly, his breath catching. "You led me here," he realized quietly. "To protect me. You protected me from Eric and his crew," Kitty pointed out. "I was just returning the favor." A shout from outside, loud and panicked. They both froze. Running feet, more shouting. Kitty could hear fragments being carried on the cold morning air from outside. Someone yelling dead. Another voice shouting the woods. A third crying, throat torn out. The color drained from Micah's face. "No," he breathed. They scrambled to their feet. Kitty grabbed clothes from her father's chest and old shirt trousers he didn't wear anymore and shoved them at Micah. He dressed quickly, hands shaking. They ran outside together. The square was already crowded. The whole village, it seemed, gathered around something Kitty couldn't see. "It's Colum," someone near the front was saying. "I found him at dawn," another voice called out, throat ripped open just like the sheep. A third person shouted. Kitty felt Micah go rigid beside her. She grabbed his arm and pulled him away from the crowd behind one of the cottages where they could speak without being overheard. His face was gray. "Micah," Kitty said urgently, "look at me." He didn't. "It wasn't you," she said firmly. "You were with me all night. You didn't leave the cottage, but before Micah interrupted, before I shifted. "I don't remember anything between leaving the square and waking up in your room. What if he choked on the words. "What if I did it before you saw me?" "No," Kitty said. She grabbed his shoulders. "Micah, listen to me. I saw you before you shifted. You were sleepwalking, you weren't aggressive, you couldn't have killed someone in that state and then just wandered calmly into the woods. And if you had," she added, "there would have been blood on your clothes, your hands, your face." "There wasn't." He shook his head. "You can't know that for certain," he protests. "I don't even know what I am, what I'm capable of." "Well, I do," Kitty started. "No, you don't," Micah said, and his voice cracked. "You need to stay away from me, Kitty." He looked at her, and the fear in his eyes broke her. "If I hurt you. If I ever hurt you," he whispered, "I would not survive it. Do you understand? I would not survive it." Kitty crossed the space between them in 2 strides. She took his face in both hands and kissed him. It wasn't graceful. Her nose bumped his, her hands were shaking, but the moment her lips touched his, a sound left him low and raw and broken, and he kissed her back. His hands came up to her waist, pulling her closer. She tasted salt, didn't know if it was from his tears or hers, and then he stepped back. "Stay away from me, Kitty," he whispered. "Please, until I know what I am, Micah." Kitty started, but he was already walking away. Chapter 8. All day, Kitty sat at the mending table in her cottage pretending to repair a fishing net while her father prepared his gear for the evening. Tonight, the men would go into the woods armed. Either they found the wolf and managed to kill it, or the wolf would fight back, would win because it was faster and stronger and more deadly than any of them understood. Probably kill someone in the process. And then the mob would be certain it was a monster that needed to be destroyed. Micah would have to run before they figured out who he was. She would never see him again. Kitty's chest tightened. She couldn't accept this. She needed a way to prove his innocence. She'd been with the wolf almost every night for months. It had never hurt her. But if not the wolf, then who? Kitty stood abruptly. The net slid from her lap. "Going somewhere?" her father asked, looking up from the spear he was sharpening. Marin's Kitty said. The village elder looked up from her mortar and pestle as Kitty closed the door of her cottage. I need something, Kitty said. A sleeping draught the strongest you have. Something that would knock out a horse. Marin's weathered face showed no surprise. 5 drops in water, Marin said, pulling down a small dark bottle. Kitty took it. Then she found Micah at the forge as the afternoon sun began to slant toward evening. Kitty, he said when he saw her. The hunt is tonight, Kitty said, but I have a plan, Micah, to prove you're innocent. He turned back to the forge. Kitty, just listen, she said. The silence stretched, then he nodded. Kitty took a breath. What if we could prove you weren't the wolf tonight? What if when the hunt happens you weren't able to shift Micah's hands stilled on the poker? How a sleeping draught, Kitty said. Strong enough to keep a grown man unconscious for hours. If you take it before the hunt starts, then if something happens tonight, we'll know it wasn't you. Micah turned to look at her. The hope in his eyes was almost painful to see. What if it doesn't work on the wolf? He asked. Then we tie you up first, Kitty said. She could see it happening, the war in his eyes. Why are you doing this for me? He asked finally. Because I love you, she thought. Because you're both the man I fell for on the beach and the wolf who brings me shells. Because I can't lose you. Because you're innocent, she said. And I can prove it. Micah looked at her for a long moment, then he nodded. Where the boat shed was cold and smelled like tar and salt water. Kitty arrived first, lighting a single lantern and setting it on an overturned crate. The shadows it cast were long and wavering. Micah came just as the last light was fading from the sky. Sit, she said, gently gesturing to a clear patch of floor. Kitty pulled the bottle from her pocket, counted the drops into a cup of water. Micah drank it in one swallow. How long until it works? He asked. Soon, Kitty said. She knelt beside him with the rope. She started with his wrists wrapped, the rope carefully looping it in a way that would hold firm but wouldn't cut. If he shifted, the wolf's paws were larger than human hands. The rope would still hold, but wouldn't tighten and hurt. Who gave you the drug? Micah asked. His words were starting to slur just slightly. Morin, Kitty said. She knows what she's doing. Micah's eyelids drooped. Yeah, I can. He chuckled, the sound loose and sleepy. I can tell. He tried to blink, his eyes open. Kitty moved to his ankles, the same careful knots testing each one. By tomorrow, hopefully we'll know who's framing you, she said quietly. Framing me? Micah asked sleepily. Kitty sat beside him close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Yes. Someone has to be framing you. Well, the wolf, because if it's not you, then it's someone else, right? Micah's head dropped to her shoulder. Kitty, he murmured. The way he said her name, soft and intimate, almost tender, made her shiver. Yes, she asked. Don't he groaned, like speaking and staying awake was so difficult. Don't stay here, just sleep, Micah, she told him. She started to run her fingers through his hair. He shivered at the touch. Kitty, he said again, fighting to get the words out. You're going home, right? Don't stay here with me. It's not safe. I won't stay, Kitty said. It wasn't a lie. She wouldn't stay in the shed. Good, he mumbled. He paused. And you're going home, right? Right, Kitty. She didn't reply, just kept stroking his hair. Sleep, she said instead. He tried to look at her. Ah, Kitty, he said, and then he groaned and his eyes fell shut. She waited until his breathing deepened, until his full weight settled against her shoulder. Then she shook him gently. Micah. His head lulled against her, the tension that usually lived in his jaw and his shoulders completely gone. She traced her fingers along his cheekbone, committing it to memory, because what she was about to do was dangerous, and if something went wrong, no, she couldn't think like that. She carefully shifted him, lowering his head onto a folded sail. Sorry, she whispered, brushing his hair back one more time. I can't go home. We have to know for your sake. She picked up her lantern, then she slipped out of the shed and into the night. Her plan was simple. Dangerously simple. If Micah was tied up and unconscious, unable to shift, unable to move, then anything that happened tonight couldn't be him. But she needed to be in the woods to witness it. The forest loomed ahead of her, dark and vast. She could already hear voices in the distance, the mob gathering, spreading out, beginning the hunt. Kitty's hands shook as she gripped the lantern. She was terrified, but she had to do this for Micah. She stepped between the trees. The lantern cast a small circle of light around her, pushing back the darkness, but also making her visible. She moved slowly, trying to stay quiet even though every step seemed impossibly loud. She could hear the hunt spreading through the forest, the crack of branches, men calling to each other. A sound to her left made her freeze, voices getting closer, her heart hammered. If they found her out here alone, they would ask questions she couldn't answer. They might even accuse her of conspiring with the wolf. She had to hide. The voices were getting louder. She could see torchlight flickering between the trees. She doused her lantern, plunging herself into darkness. The sudden absence of light was disorienting. She could barely see her own hands. Only faint moonlight filtering through the canopy gave any illumination. The voices were very close now. Kitty dropped to her knees and crawled into a thick patch of bushes, pressing herself flat. Branches scraped her face. Something sharp dug into her palm. Torchlight swept over the bushes. She held her breath. 2 men passed within feet of her. "Should check the beach side," someone was saying. They moved on. The torchlight faded. Kitty let out a shaky breath. She started to crawl back out and felt something next to her. Fabric closed. Someone was in the bushes with her. Terror shot through her. She turned her head slowly. It wasn't moving. Whatever it was completely still. Maybe just discarded clothes, she thought desperately. The men were moving back this way, their torches swinging. The light swept across the bushes again, and in that brief flash of illumination, Kitty saw what was next to her. A body, a dead man lying on his side, eyes wide open and glassy blood on his mouth. Finn, her father's friend. The scream ripped out of her before she could stop it. She thrashed backward, scrambling out of the bushes. "Who's there?" A voice called, footsteps running toward her. Kitty tried to stand to run, but her legs wouldn't work. A torch appeared above her, then a face. "Eric, Kitty," he said, sounding shocked. Behind him, Wynne held another torch. "What are you doing out here?" Relief flooded through her. "Someone who could help." She gasped. In the bushes." "Slow down," Eric said, crouching beside her. "Are you hurt?" "No, I'm not. There's a body," Kitty said. "In the bushes right there." I touched him. Eric's expression shifted. He exchanged a glance with Wynne. "A body," Finn, Kitty said. Tears were running down her face. "It's Finn. He's dead." "Show me," Eric said. He helped her to her feet. She pointed toward the bushes with a trembling hand. There, Eric moved past her, pushing into the bushes. His torch illuminated the space she'd fled from. Kitty stood with wind hugging herself. She could hear Eric moving branches aside. Then silence. "It's Finn," Eric confirmed, emerging from the bush's throat torn out just like Colum, the wolf, Wynne said. "It has to be the wolf." "No," Kitty said. Both men turned to look at her. "What do you mean, no?" Eric asked. "It can't be the wolf," Kitty said. "The wolf is a shifter, a person who can turn into a wolf. I know who it is, and they're not doing this because they can't be. They're asleep right now." Eric stared at her. "A shifter?" "Yes," Kitty said. "I know it sounds insane, but I saw it happen, and tonight I drugged them, gave them a sleeping draft. They're tied up in my father's boat shed right now. They couldn't have done this. I can prove it." "You drugged someone," Eric said. Something in his expression had changed, hardened. "To prove they're innocent," Kitty explained. "Don't you see, if they're asleep and tied up and someone still dies, then we know it wasn't the wolf, it's someone else. Someone is killing people and making it look like the wolf. He's in your father's boat shed," Eric finished, drugged, tied up. "Exactly," Kitty said, relief washed over her. "We can go there right now. I'll show you and then we can prove to everyone." Eric grabbed her. His hand clamped over her mouth before she could make a sound. Kitty's eyes went wide. "You should have kept your mouth shut," Eric said quietly in her ear. Terror flooded through her, cold and absolute. "Wynne, go to her father's shed," Eric said. "Kill the wolf while he sleeps." Wynne hesitated, looked between Eric and Kitty. "What about go?" Eric said. Now backed away, then turned and ran. Kitty couldn't breathe. She'd made a mistake, a terrible, fatal mistake. And Micah, drugged and defenseless and tied up in the boat shed, had no idea what was coming for him. Chapter 9. Kitty tried to fight, threw her weight backward, tried to stomp on his foot, anything. "Stop," Eric hissed in her ear. "Do you know how easy it was to kill Colum and Finn?" Something cold pressed against her throat. Metal, sharp, a knife across the throat. Eric continued conversationally. "Then I rough up the carcass with a hooked blade. Make it look like claws. One white wolf in the woods, and suddenly every dead sheep is a monster's work. People are so bloody stupid when they're scared." Kitty made a sound against his palm. "If only you'd just married me, little Kitty," Eric said. All of this could have been avoided, but no. Little Kitty would rather stare at birds and collect her rocks than spread her legs for a man. He shoved her hard against a tree trunk. The impact knocked the air from her lungs. Colum was undercutting my prices, and Finn knew all the best fishing spots. Kitty managed to turn her head slightly enough to see his face. He looked insane. "Acquiring your father's business would have been the smart move," Eric continued, but he didn't want to give up his spots and boats for anyone other than his little girl's husband. He spun her around to face him, kept the knife at her throat. The wolf is perfect, Eric said, his eyes gleaming. As long as it's alive, everything I do gets blamed on it. Every death-perfect cover. Kitty started thrashing again. Please, she gasped. You have what you wanted. Your competitors are dead. I'll even marry you. Anything, please. Just don't hurt him. Eric's smile widened. Him? You mean your beast? He hasn't done anything, Kitty cried. You know he hasn't. Please, Eric. Eric pressed the knife harder. I don't think so, because killing it makes me a hero. The man who saved Saltmir from the beast. They'll give me anything I want after that. His grin turned vicious, and I won't even have to marry you to get it. Kitty tried to twist out of his grip. You won't get away with this. I'll tell everyone. Eric laughed. How will you do that when I cut that pretty little throat of yours, Kitty? Oh, everyone will be so horrified to find out what the wolf did to poor stupid Kitty. Perhaps your poor broken-hearted father will be happy to give me his business for avenging you. He pressed the knife harder, and I won't even need to put up with you. Kitty opened her mouth to scream. Eric clamped his hand over it again. You should have stayed home. He pulled the knife back, positioned it. She could see the intent in his eyes. The knife arced toward her throat, and the wolf hit him from the side like an avalanche before he could strike. A white blur of muscle and fury that caught Eric mid-strike and took him to the ground. Eric screamed. Kitty stumbled backward, gasping. The wolf here, but he was supposed to be tied up. How? The wolf pinned Eric to the ground, its jaws clamped down on his arm, the arm that had held the knife, and wrenched. The sound of bone breaking was sharp and wet. Eric screamed again, high and terrified. He threw a punch at the wolf's skull. The wolf barely flinched. It released his arm and went for his throat. No hesitation, no mercy. Eric's screams turned liquid, then stopped. It was over in seconds. The wolf stood over Eric's body, breathing hard, and then it staggered. Micah Kitty gasped. She ran to it, dropping to her knees beside the massive white form. The wolf turned its head toward her. Those golden eyes were dimming, glazed with pain, and then she saw it, the wound. A deep gash along its left flank. No, Kitty breathed. No, no, no. She pressed her hands against the wound. Torch light flickered through the trees. Kitty's head snapped up. The mob burst into the clearing. 12 men, maybe 15, armed with axes and pitchforks and spears. Her father was among them. They saw Eric's body first, the blood, the torn throat. Then they saw the wolf. Kill it, someone shouted. The beast murdered Eric. A spear raised torches pressed closer. The wolf lifted its head. Its golden eyes were dimming, but it bared its teeth anyway. Kitty stood. She placed herself between the wolf and the mob. She was shaking, but she spread her arms wide. You'll have to kill me first, she said. Her voice carried across the clearing like a bell. Kitty, get out of the way, her father said. That thing killed Eric. Eric killed Colum. Kitty shouted. Eric killed Finn. Eric tried to kill me. The wolf saved me. She's mad. Someone started, I'm not mad. Eric confessed everything to me. He was killing people and blaming the wolf. Kitty. Her father tried again. No. She held her ground. You'll have to go through me. I won't let you hurt him. Behind her, the wolf made a sound, low and pained, and then something changed. The air shifted, grew heavy like the moment before lightning strikes. The wolf's breathing hitched, changed rhythm. Kitty turned. The transformation was nothing like what she'd seen in the clearing that first night. This was fast and fluid and almost gentle, like a knot finally untied. The white fur receded like frost melting in sunlight. The massive body contracted, reshaped, and in less time than it took to draw breath where the wolf had stood bleeding Micah now laid. The mob went silent, staring at the blacksmith's apprentice lying broken in a clearing. Kitty dropped to her knees beside him. It wasn't him, she said, looking up at the stunned faces. It was Eric. Her voice broke. He's hurt. Please let me take him to Marin's, please. No one moved. Please, Kitty said again. Her father broke from the crowd first. He knelt beside her, looked at Micah's pale face at the blood. Help me carry him, he said gruffly to the men behind him. Chapter 10. Marin's cottage was crowded. Kitty sat on a low wooden stool beside the table where Micah laid. Marin bent over him. Behind them, Kitty's father stood near the door with the village chief. Kitty, the village chief, said, "Start speaking." Eric was the one who killed the sheep and the 2 men, Kitty said. Her father's face went gray. What were you even doing out there, Kitty? I had to do something, she said. You were all so intent on killing the wolf, so you thought you'd risk your life for some animal, her father shouted. Micah isn't dangerous, Kitty protested. I still coming to terms with the fact that Micah is the wolf, the village chief muttered. He's a shifter, Kitty explained, looking at Marin. Right. Indeed he is, Marin said calmly, which works out in his favor. His wounds are all healed. What Kitty rushed to his side, his skin was smooth, unmarked. Shifters have strong healing capacities, Marin said. So he'll live, the village chief asked. He'll live, Marin confirmed. Kitty touched Micah's chest where the wound had been. Micah, she called softly. He didn't stir and she panicked. Why isn't he responding? Marin snorted. Well, you gave him that sleeping draft. He needs to sleep it off still. But then how did he wake up earlier to save me? Kitty asked. Marin's smile turned knowing. I have my theory. We'll know more once he wakes. We need to restrain him, the village chief said. You'll do no such thing, Marin said sharply. Micah is out like a light. Kitty needs rest. I'll keep watch. You can post guards outside, but no one is tying up an unconscious man in my home. Her father hesitated at the door, then followed the chief outside. You should sleep, child, Marin told Kitty. When she woke next gray morning, light filtered through the shutters. Micah was still sleeping on the table. Kitty pulled the stool close and touched his cheek. I'm sorry, she whispered. Micah sighed softly, then his eyes opened blue, clear, looking directly at her. Kitty, he said. His voice was rough from sleep but full of warmth. Relief flooded through her. You're all right, she breathed. Micah sat up slowly. His movements were easy, fluid, no pain. What's wrong? He asked. He cupped her cheek with one hand. His thumb brushed just under her eye, catching a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. His thumb moved lower, found the cut on her neck. He hurt you, Micah said, his voice low. Dangerous. That bastard. It's okay, Kitty said quickly. You stopped him. Micah searched her face. You're still scared, though, he observed. His voice had softened again, filled with concern. Because of me. Did I scare you, Kitty, when the wolf... No, she said firmly. No, it's just everything caught up to her at once and he burst into tears. What's wrong? Micah asked. He pulled her to his chest. One hand cradled her head against him, the other wrapped around her back. Don't cry, he murmured into her hair. It's over now, my love. You're safe. The words cut through her crying made her breath hitch. She wanted to believe him, but the villagers, Micah, she said through her tears, they saw you shift. They won't understand what you are. They might. It doesn't matter, Micah said. His hand kept moving through her hair, stroking soothing. None of that matters anymore. His smile was luminous. Kitty. I remember everything now, thanks to you. A trumpet sounded outside, clear and ceremonial. Kitty heard excited commotion from the village, confused shouting. What's happening? She asked. The entire village was gathering in the square, horses with gleaming coats, people in silks and velvets, banners bearing the crest of a neighboring kingdom. Micah's hand steadied her arm. It's all right. They're here for me. What? She turned and immediately spun around. Her face burning, put on some clothes. She heard him laugh. I apologize. Outside the noise was growing. Come, Micah said behind her. I'm decent now. He offered his hand. She took it. They stepped outside together. Her father stood near the front of the crowd, his face pale and confused. And then someone at the center of the gathering announced in a loud, formal voice that carried across the square. Her Royal Majesty, Princess Adeline of House Stoneham. A woman stepped out of an ornate carriage. She wore a gown of light green silk woven with pearls, and on her head a crown silver and delicate. Something about her face was familiar, the shape of her eyes pale blue, just like Micah's. Where is he? The princess demanded. Her voice cut through the murmurs of the crowd like a knife. What did you do to my brother? The crowd looked panicked, confused. The village chief stepped forward, looking utterly lost and intimidated, his hands twisted together. My lady, he began. It's your majesty to you. Someone from the princess's entourage snapped. Your majesty. The chief tried again. He bowed clumsily. We have no idea where your brother is. Don't lie to me. The princess said he is a king, and believe me, if one hair on his head was hurt, this entire kingdom will suffer for Adeline. Micah said his voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Enough. He stepped forward from Marin's doorway, still holding Kitty's hand. The entire crowd around the princess dropped to their knees as one like puppets with cut strings. Your Majesty, they said in unison, their heads bowing low. The princess herself didn't bow, but Kitty saw the change in her face. Micah, she exclaimed. She rushed forward and threw her arms around him. Micah had to let go of Kitty's hand to return the embrace. The entire village stood in stunned silence, Kitty included. What was going on? Where have you been? the princess demanded. "We've been looking everywhere for you for months. I couldn't feel you." Her voice cracked. "I thought you were dead." "I was cursed," Micah said simply. "How?" the princess asked. "Who would dare, your majesty?" The village chief interrupted nervously. "This man he's suspected of murder. He killed Eric." "This man," the princess said, turning toward the chief with an expression that could have frozen fire, "is the Alpha King Micah of House Stoneham, and he'll murder whomever he damn well pleases." The square went silent, Sister Micah said firmly, but there was affection in his voice. "You're not helping the Alpha King," the village chief repeated faintly. Kitty's mind went blank. Completely blank. The Alpha King, Micah was a king, and she'd tied him up in her father's boat shed. "I had to punish Eric," Micah said, addressing the crowd. "He was going to kill my kitty." He'd already tried to hurt her once before. The entire crowd, newcomers and villagers alike, turned to stare at her. She cleared her throat. "It's true," she said. Eric was the one who killed the livestock and killed Colum and Finn, not Micah." The villagers looked startled. Murmurs rippled through them like wind through wheat. "It's true," a voice said from the back of the crowd. "Eric confessed it to me." Wind stepped forward. He looked pale but determined. His hands shook slightly, but his voice was steady. Micah gave him a small nod, just a dip of his chin. Wind nodded back. "Who is this Eric?" the princess asked. "Micah, the one who cursed you." "No," Micah said, shaking his head. "That was Queen Vesper, the one you rejected." The princess asked, amused now, the very one Micah confirmed. He grimaced. She didn't appreciate the rejection, which I suppose was somewhat my fault. I wasn't the most considerate to her in how I delivered it. "Anyway, she cursed me to forget who I was," he explained. "Not just a king, but even a wolf. I couldn't remember needing to shift, and when my body eventually did shift out of necessity, I'd forget about it instantly. I'd forget I was a man when I was a wolf, and that I was a wolf when I was a man. It's why I couldn't find you through the bond," the princess asked. Micah nodded. "The curse was specific. I would remain like that until someone could love both halves of me without knowing they were the same." There was a silence. Then someone from the village, Lena, said, "Oh, he means Kitty." Someone else, "Definitely." Bess said, "Yes, has to be Kitty." And now everyone was nodding along, murmuring agreement. "Yeah, Kitty loves Micah. She's been in love with him since he washed up. It's so obvious. Kitty wanted to die." Not only was it true, embarrassingly, painfully, obviously true, but now she was going to lose Micah anyway, because he was a king and she was just a fisherman's daughter who talked to birds. And Micah turned to her. "Thank you, Kitty," he said softly. The princess looked at her too. She smiled, but it was polite. "Yes. Thank you, peasant girl," she said, like Kitty was perfectly inconsequential to her world. Micah turned to his sister and he growled, his eyes flashing gold. "You're addressing my mate and your future queen," he said. "Be more respectful." The princess's eyes widened, then she beamed. "Oh," she exclaimed. "She's your mate." "Truly?" "Yes," Micah said. His voice had softened. He was looking at Kitty again. Movement at the door, Marin appeared. "Just as I thought," the old woman said with a satisfied smile. "It's why he was able to wake up when you needed him despite the draft. You are his mate." "I'm not sure what that means," Kitty muttered. "He will explain," dear Marin said with a little smirk. Micah took both of Kitty's hands. She looked up at him, at this man who was apparently a king who could have anyone. "You found me on a beach with nothing," he said, "and you gave me a name." His smile was soft tender. "And without knowing it, you guessed right, because you know me, Kitty. You felt our bond even when I couldn't." Kitty frowned. "Our bond?" she asked. He puffed her cheek. "The connection between us," he said, "the link that binds us already, even though I haven't yet claimed you properly." "You feel it, don't you, Micah?" she protested, looking away. "You're a king. He made her look at him, his hand gentle but firm on her chin, tilting her face up to his. "You sat with my wolf," he said, "and never once were afraid. And when the entire village wanted him dead, you stood in front of him and dared them to go through you." His voice was steady but full of emotion. "You loved me before you knew what I was. You loved the wolf before you knew he was me." He took a breath. "You are my mate, Kitty, the other half of my soul, and if you'll have me, I would very much like to make you my queen." Her mind went blank, completely, utterly blank. Everyone was staring at her. The villagers she'd known her whole life, the princess with her crown and her silk, the soldiers with their swords and their banners. But it didn't matter. None of it mattered because Micah who was a king apparently, but was also the man who'd washed up on her beach who turned into a wolf, was staring at her. She meant to say something beautiful, something worthy of a queen. What came out was, "I am covered in blood." Silence. Then Micah laughed. "Is that a yes?" he asked. His eyes were dancing, delighted. She kissed him, launched herself at him, really rose up on her toes and pressed her lips to his in front of the whole village. She kissed him and he caught her, his arms wrapping around her waist. Everyone cheered, the sound was deafening, and Kitty knew standing there in the square with this impossible man who was somehow hers that she would follow him anywhere. Him, the bond that had always pulled them together.